Monday, August 6, 2018, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning I'd like to talk about Keynes and how his philosophy, his theory, economic theories have led to big government, more authoritarianism, and basically fascism. And he even admits in the foreword or preface of his German edition book in 1936 that his theories, general theories, work better under an authoritarian system. So I'm going to look into that and show you why people on the other side of the spectrum, or on the libertarian free market spectrum like me, try to expose Keynesian economics, which unfortunately is still taught worldwide. Is the mainstream economics we have today. It's the economics of government statistics that can be fudged and fiddled. It's the economics of the globalists who think they can tweak the economy better than the markets can. They think the free market can't be left to its own devices. Basically, yeah, the philosophy of big government, globalization, New World Order. And Keynes is a poster boy of that. Before, though, I go further into that, let's have a look at what the markets are doing this morning. It's 8 a.m. London. So here we go. Spot gold actually fairly unchanged this morning. 12.1320, down a third of a cent, a dollar, 30 cents. It has been as high as 12.18 and as low as 12.41. I saw that on Friday. We rebounded quite sharply off the lows at 12.04, and it went up all the way to 12.20. So that level now is resistance in gold. Silver is down 1 cent at 15.40 basically. Range has been 15.37 to 15.50. The Dow up 13 points at 25,469. S&P futures unchanged. The NASDAQ 100 futures up 7 points, just exactly at 7,400. So fairly quiet market so far. Currency-wise, sterling is just below 130. It's at 129.96, down about 6 pips. The euro, is down 7 pips at 115.60. So not much change there either. Not much change in dollar yen either. So very quiet so far. 111.30, up 4 pips. What about the Chinese currency? The dollar is up nominally also against the yuan. It's up 0.07%. Crude oil up 0.25% at 68.07. And the 10-year yield dropped a bit on Friday. Non-farm payroll is a little lower than expected. We are right now at 2.95%. Last week we got back briefly over 3%. We'll have to see if, where rates move this week. So, statistics, Keynesian economics, and Keynes, how can I say, major work was called The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. That was written in 1936. This is what Wikipedia says about the book. The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money of 1936 is the last and most important book by the English economist John Maynard Keynes. It's funny they call him an economist, but he was actually had a degree in maths. And it goes on to say it created a profound shift in economic thought, giving macroeconomics a central place in economic theory and contributing much of its terminology, the Keynesian revolution. So there you go. When people talk about macroeconomics these days, about government economic statistics and measurements, it's all because of Keynes. Prior to Keynes, governments didn't really care too much about statistics. because they weren't involved in the economy. But nowadays, governments are so omnipotent or so huge, especially in Europe. In the US, it's not as bad, but it's up there. Government spends such a huge part of the economy that it has become common for economists to look at all these statistics. The interesting thing about Keynes, though, and is what he said, and I take this from like this blog. It's called Social Democracy for the 21st Century. So these are leftists, right? And this was written in 2011. So I'll go over this article in this blog, and it says, Keynes' remarks in the German edition of the General Theory, his main work. And it says, Rothbard, who's an Austrian, who I have his books. I haven't bothered to buy a Keynes book. Maybe I should. Yeah, maybe sometimes you need to know what your enemy is doing. But anyway, it goes to say, Rothbard accuses Keynes of having a strong fascist bent. But the only evidence for this consists in a passage he cites written in an introduction to the General Theory for German audiences in 1936. This passage in the foreword to the German edition of the General Theory has provoked hordes of rubbish about Keynes. Here is what Keynes actually said. Well, I'll leave it to you to decide if it's rubbish. Of course, this guy is a social democrat, which is basically a socialist. So this is what Keynes said. The theory of aggregated production, which is the point of the following book, nevertheless can be much easier adapted to the conditions of a totalitarian state than the theory of production and distribution of a given production put forth under conditions of free competition and a large degree of laissez-faire. And I'll keep reading it. This guy highlighted these parts, but I'll continue to the unhighlighted part. This is one of the reasons that justifies the fact that I call my theory a general theory, since it is based on fewer hypotheses than the orthodox theory. It can accommodate itself all the easier to a wider field of varying conditions. So he's saying, yeah, it's suited better for authoritarian conditions or fascist conditions, but you can adjust it. But as we've seen in the last 80 years since this was written, it's shifted more and more. Economies and the free world have shifted more and more to authoritarianism, more taxation, more regulation, more government interference, right? And he says, although I have, after all, worked it out with a view to the conditions prevailing in the Anglo-Saxon countries, where a large degree of laissez-faire still prevails, right? Still, nevertheless, it remains applicable to situations in which state management is more pronounced. The guy who wrote this in this blog says it's rubbish. I personally think, it's very clear. He says that his theory is easier adapted in conditions of a totalitarian state. And that's what's happened over the years, unfortunately. So that's why I'm the home of alternative economics, because I want to wake people up to this Keynesian mainstream economics that's based on the pretext that governments and central bankers know what's better for the economy. They know what rate to set for market prices. And we know that never works. We know the Soviet Union collapsed. Central planning does not work. The free market is the best regulator of the markets. And it promotes freedom as well. And the only way we can have that is with small governments, with no central banks, and sound money, which of course are things that Keynes was totally against. Keynes called the gold standard a barbarous relic. I would say the barbaric economic system is what we've got now, which is spawned from this Keynesian theory. So what about GDP? Well, last week we had US GDP data come out, and lo and behold, they made a revision to past GDPs. And like out of, thin air, out of their spreadsheets, they've increased the savings rate in the US in 2007 from 3.4% to 6.7%. What this basically means is that they revised the GDP of the US a lot higher in the last few years. And this is the US Commerce Department's Bureau of Economic, it's BEA, I'm not sure what that stands for, Bureau of Economic Analysis. But so overnight, the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. Have created all this wealth, all this GDP that wasn't there before. What this means is that, and the way they've done this is by increasing, they said, oh, Americans are saving a lot more. But, and the other thing this article points is that a lot of this is just the top, 10% of American. And they point out that the bottom half of Americans still have no savings. But what this means is that the debt doesn't look as bad because the GDP figure is bigger, the gross GDP annually. And the other thing is these mainstream economics from banks like Bank of America, Goldman Sachs. Now they're saying that the economy could do better because Americans can dip more into their savings and they can keep spending a bit longer. So this is like all, how can I say, a product of Keynes. And they're trying to manage perception of the public. Hey, look, you guys are much wealthier now. You have a lot more savings than you thought. So there you go. I'll put a link to this story below in the description. I've read the article, but I'll let you read it. But it will make some difference to the debt to GDP ratio, because the GDP number's gone up. You can bet they won't revise the debt higher. They'll probably revise it lower very soon. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share it, subscribe to my channel. You can also support my channel by going to the Monaco 64 store. I've got quite a few products there with Billy, who's not here right now, but he will be here soon again. I've got a new shirt, End the Fed shirt, Sound Money for America. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.